Hello everyone, and you're all very welcome to today's Client Experience webinar programme on building high-performing in-house legal teams. Our Client Experience webinar programme is focused on bringing you practical insights on some of the most topical issues and opportunities facing you and your in-house legal team, and today's topic is no different. People are our greatest asset, be it as team leaders, as team members, or as individuals. We are reliant on others to drive sustainable success. So with that in mind, we're keen to support you and your in-house legal teams to drive high performance across your business, and by doing so, solidify the critical role and value of the legal function within your organisations. So let's get started. As always, these sessions are all about you and the value you get from the next 60 minutes. We're keen for you to get the most value out of it in terms of practical takeaways. So I encourage you to make the most of the chat and the messaging functions as we work through today's discussion. So without further ado, I'm excited to hand you over to my colleague at Dentons, Yvonne Garrix, who's our fantastic host for today's session.
Thanks, Niamh, and hello everyone, welcome to the session. As Niamh said, my name's Yvonne Garrix. I'm the Head of Talent Development for our UK, Ireland and Middle East region, and I will be your host today. And one of the reasons why I was really keen to lead this webinar today is the topic. I'm definitely very focused at the moment on how we create a high-performing team, what makes a high-performing team. And this is definitely a topic that we're talking about in the UK, Ireland and Middle East region. So I'll just allow our other speakers today to introduce themselves. So Nisha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, Yvonne, thanks so much. And hello, everybody. Nisha O'Kelly Hughes is my name. And I'm joining you today from what is now a very bright, sunny southeast of Ireland. And I have a coach and consultancy business based here in Ireland, but we have a global reach and work across many boundaries. And we work mainly with CEOs and leadership teams who are really looking to grow their business and enable their people in the business to thrive. So we do this mainly through supporting them to design and deliver, execute on a robust strategy for their business and right-sizing it to where they're at, depending on industry, sector and size. But main key part of my area of complete passion is all about people, and is getting people in teams to work together really well, to collaborate, and exploring how to build those high-performing team cultures within the business. And we have a global partnership with Fearless Culture who help us to do that. So we do this through culture design, renovation, and we use a strengths-based approach in all our work, focusing on the engagement of the employee and the team member. So I'm really delighted to be invited to join you and looking forward to talking to you on the topic today. And I suppose my aim for the day is that you'll get a takeaway, something very actionable, very tactical and very practical to use to build your own high-performing team within your in-house legal team and help them to connect to the business impact and really make a change in the coming weeks and months ahead. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thanks, Nisha. And some of you may recognise Kate, who's a regular presenter on our CX programs. Kate, would you just like to introduce yourself?
Thanks very much, Yvonne. For those I haven't met before, my name is Kate Brower. I'm the Global Inclusion, Diversity and Equity Officer here at Dentons. I hope to play a smaller role as we hear from Nisha and Yvonne on this great topic, but I will be hopefully inputting a few nuggets along the way around the importance of inclusion, diversity in this conversation. So I look forward to it. And unfortunately, it's not so sunny where I am. I'm saying a good morning from a quite gray Toronto.
Lovely. Thanks, Kate. So in terms of what we're going to be covering today, three main things. So the first of all, we are focusing on what makes a high-performing team. And there was some research, some really interesting research that we'll be sharing with you. And out of that research, there are 5 key elements that we would like to focus on. So we will walk through those 5 elements, and we'll ask you, as we're going through this, to really apply these to your team, to think about how does this apply with the teams that you're currently working in, and when we move on to the practical tips, how you can implement some of these things within your teams. One of the things that we really would like to focus on today is the notion of what makes a high-performing team. Now, whether that is an in-house legal team, whether that is in private practice, the research that we're going to share with you is very much focused on us as individuals and how we as individuals work, within the settings that we're based. We have focused on very specific legal teams in a commercial context in some of our previous sessions, and we've just listed some of the ones here. And if you want a copy of these slides, please let us know. I'm sure Niamh and Natalie will be able to share those with you. But we have focused a considerable amount on very specific in-house legal teams. But what we're doing today is really focusing on that big picture of what individuals need to do within your team, whether it's in-house or whether it's private practice. So the research before we go on to the research, we're going to ask you a couple of questions. Question number 1. Thinking about your team, do you feel that your current team is a high-performing team? Easy question. Yes, no, or not sure. And the second part of the question is, when it comes to your in-house legal team, how do you measure their performance? So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to complete the questions. And Niamh, let us know.
Yes, I can see lots. It's lovely to see so many people jumping in to get involved. So we're heading towards the 50% mark in terms of participation. So this is what we'll do is once we just get up a little bit higher, we're going to end the poll and share the results with you all, which will be hopefully valuable in terms of benchmarking how other people on the call are actually viewing both whether or not they're part of a high-performing team and also how they're going about measuring performance and high performance specifically. So we are moving towards the 70% mark at this stage. I'm going to do a 3, 2, 1. Any late votes can pop in just now, and I'm going to stop the poll and share the results with you all. So thanks to everybody for getting involved. Okay. So really interesting, Yvonne, 68% have said that they do actually feel like they're either leading or part of a high-performing team, which is really great to see. Whereas we have another 32% either not sure or really not feeling that performance is where it potentially could be. Interesting results also, and similar, we actually ran this session earlier in a different time zone, and results are somewhat similar, I have to say. So people measuring 70% through employee performance appraisals, also looking at client service feedback from the business around the quality of service that their in-house legal function is delivering, and then followed by productivity, so output, and then down the way in terms of the options to collaboration and the level of teamwork that's going on within the team are the next scale results. So thanks everyone for participating. Really interesting insights for us to start the session with today. Back to you, Yvonne.
Yeah, thank you very much. And great to see such positive results for high performance. And for those people who are maybe not quite there yet or not sure, hopefully this session will point you in the right direction in terms of areas to focus on. So we just before we kick off, if you wouldn't mind having a think about what is high performance for you? When have you worked in a high performing team? So just have a think about that. And you may belong to a number of teams. Normally we're part of, we have our core functional team. We might work in cross-functional teams. We're probably part of various leadership teams. Maybe we're part of a project team. But have a think about all of the teams that you belong to. Which ones do you enjoy working in the most? And if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, maybe one word, if you can narrow it down to one word that describes why you enjoy working in that team. We're gonna compare this with our research on high performing teams. So fingers crossed, it works out for us. Okay, so lots of things coming in. Collaboration, I'm seeing lots of times. Culture, fun, energized, slick. Yep, we're going to come back to all of these, which is great. Sharing, so very similar to collaborative. There seems to be a theme coming through. High energy, trust, proactive, great. Innovation. And I like the trust in one direction. This is good. This is going to help us, I think, Nisha and Kate, in terms of what we want to talk about next. Fun, vision, empowerment. Great. And good teamwork, creativity. Oh, there's some wonderful things here. Thank you. And it's great to see some of these amazing teams that you're working with. And psychologically safe. Thank you, Grania, for sending that, putting that in the chat. That is definitely something we're going to come back to. And egoless. Wonderful. Swell, thank you for that. That leads very nicely into what we want to talk about, because there's lots of research about high-performing teams. The research that we are going to focus on today is particularly around something called the Aristotle Project. You may or may not have heard about that. But the Aristotle Project is based on Google's research. So in 2016, Google conducted a 3-year study on what makes teams high performing at Google. They had various theories beforehand. All of them were dismissed. So they were thinking high performing teams are probably going to be the ones where you have the most intelligent people on the team. They thought maybe it's going to be those teams that are full of extroverts, people who really want to get things done, have lots to say, lots of ideas, and share those ideas. They also looked at duration of teams. So are long-standing teams. Oh, sorry, I missed one slide. Niamh, let's come back to that one. In terms of long-standing teams and whether individuals work closely together or whether individuals work in hybrid ways, all of these theories they had. Actually, none of those aspects came as important as they were there. There were some elements, but they were not the key factors that made a team high performing at Google. What they found was that there are 5 fundamental things that a team needs to have to be considered high performing. Now, we're focusing on this research based on Google, but we know other research has supported this evidence. So we've looked at research from Harvard, we've looked at research from MIT, and they may use slightly different words or phrases to explain the different concepts, but fundamentally they agree with the Google research. So somebody obviously mentioned psychological safety. So the #1 aspect of a high-performing team is psychological safety. And Nisha and Kate will talk about that in a moment in more detail. The next most important aspect of a high-performing team was dependability. So do your team members do what they say they're going to do? Can you rely on them to deliver on their aspects, their role, their goals, their work, their responsibilities? The third most important aspect was structure and clarity. And I noticed a few people mentioned being slick, understanding, I can't remember the exact term, but understanding roles, being effective. There are a number of things, trust, one direction. So again, it relates back to, do we know what we're doing, and can I trust my team members to do what they need to do? The third most important thing was structure and clarity. So is everybody clear about their roles and responsibilities? Are they clear about accountability? Who has accountability for this? And that's shared across the team. The fourth most important one is meaning of work. So this is a really internal focused. Do I, as an individual, feel motivated, engaged, and fulfilled? And I think again, fulfilled came up in your comments. That the work I do has meaning. I have a purpose. I feel fulfilled by this work. And then the fifth most important one was impact. So in terms of the work that I do, can I see the value it's having on the business? Can I see the impact, the commercial impact? Can I see any change? Is there a reason why I come to work in the morning and I get up and I can see the value that I'm adding within my role? So high level, that's what we found, and we support the Google's research in terms of high performing teams. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Nisha, who will go through each of these with the help of Kate to look at them in more detail.
Great, thanks Yvonne for that overview. And yes, we are going to look today at the Google framework, which is named Project Aristotle. And I suppose I'm really intrigued now that 68 people on this call feel like they're in a high performing team or they're leading one. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be saying things that you're nodding and smiling behind your cameras, or maybe you're going to put a few things into the comments and teach us maybe another angle to it. So I'm wondering, is your comfortability with saying that, is it from experience of being in the teams, or is it maybe from learning? Because I suppose from our exploring this area, we find that Google's framework is replicated in lots of different other research. So Gallup Analytics, for example, another partner of ours, do a lot of research in employee engagement, and all of the stuff here that Yvonne has just gone through would really mirror that. So it's nothing new under the sun. Language is very common, but it is a different way of expressing stuff that we understand. So we're going to go through it here now. And psychological safety, as Yvonne said, is the fundamental, the first foundational step of building that high-performing team. It's a relatively new term, but it's commonly thought about, it's spoken about very widely, and I was delighted to see someone in the comments bring it up. So we gold star for that person who mentioned that. So you're asked earlier to think about these teams that you're part of. And I suppose what I'm just going to ask you now as we set the scene for here is think about, remember, if you're on a team currently or have been on one in the past, think about a time where you felt that deep sense of trust with your manager, with a colleague, where you were free to take risk, free to be creative, innovative, without that fear of failure, and where there was that rich culture of honest feedback. So maybe that's your current team, or maybe that's a team you were on previously. But now think of a team where you might have been on in the past or presently, where that's just not the case. So where there's an uncomfortability, maybe feel intimidated by a manager or colleagues, where there really is a dishonesty or a lack of trust between colleagues. And maybe you're actually afraid to bring forward suggestions, recommendations, solutions, because you felt they're likely to be dismissed. So this, what we're describing here, is psychological safety. Psychological safety or a lack of. So, we know it's a shared belief that people can take these interpersonal risks. It's all based around trust, and that came up. I wrote it down many times here through the comments. It is all based around trust, and that trust starts with yourself. If you want someone to trust you, you have to give them that trust first. So it's all centered around our own self-awareness, and that not only helps us to grow, but then it helps us to uncover blind spots we may have or biases, which I know that Kate will mention. And feedback is really vitally important to understand how we deal with and how we understand the trust. Trust is fragile, so it's very hard to build, but it's very easy to destroy. And we probably have experiences with that. And we know also that control is the enemy of trust. So where that's happening, trust is not being fostered or encouraged. So we know that this is the fundamental building block. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring you through quickly, because we are stuck on time today. So this is going to feel maybe a bit rushed at times. So just bear with us. We're going to bring you through a quite a practical way. Just on the next slide, Natalie, we're going to look at this canvas that we have within Fearless Culture, And we're going to look at two different ways of you trying to understand and assess whether or not psychological safety is present within your team. So we're going to look on one side, if you just click on, we're going to look at the ladder, and we're going to look then over at the other side around repairing the steps. So assessing where we're at, and then looking at what we can do about that once we understand where we're at. So it doesn't matter what's broken, it's all about taking one step towards fixing it. So let's try and bring you through that as a way of doing it. Because it could be something simple, like trying to figure out if you want to increase participation at meetings, maybe getting everyone to have equal airtime, or getting your team members just to know each other better, especially if you're in a remote or a hybrid environment. Or maybe it's just, getting people comfortable with asking for help. So it can be some simple stuff, things that we wouldn't maybe take for granted. So we can use this as a way of assessing that. So we'll just look to the next slide, and it'll show us what we're looking at here in terms of the different levels that we see of psychological safety. And there's a great, I suppose, there's a great crossover in what I'm talking about and what Kate is going to share with you, because what's interesting is that on level 1, the bottom rung of the level 1 ladder is that feeling about being welcome by my team, feeling included. So it's actually quite interesting how the basis of everything got to do with your psychological safety stems off being included, being welcomed in the team. So we have these 3 different levels, and they focus on different areas of the welcome piece, the belonging, and the cognitive diversity. So this is around challenging people, asking for help. You can see all the different bullet points there on your screen, and there's statements that affirm how psychologically safe your team is. So it could be around speaking up and having those unique contributions, which is around your courageous conversations, or it could be up at the highest level of innovation, where people are challenging others, they're experimenting, they're making mistakes, and they're not afraid to step forward with an idea. So these are the different levels, and you can either with your team or even just reflecting in your own time, when you have your time of reflection, maybe planning a team planning session, you can have a look at those levels and have a think about, where do you think this team sits? Of those 68 people who said they were part of the high performing team, where do you think you sit? Are you all innovating? Are you risk takers? Are you happy with failure and mistakes? Is that celebrated and encouraged in terms of creating that space for innovation? Or are you actually more along the bottom level, just more about belonging? So when we know about it more, it just helps us to understand how deep it can go. And that's the purpose of this tool. And to the right-hand side of what we're looking at here, and the right-hand side of our canvas, is all about looking at how to repair when we know what something is broken. So it's impossible to fix everything at once. And sometimes we just say, choose something, one step, and focus on the conversation to try and repair that. So we know that taking risk requires your team knowing that you'll be there for them. So imagine this circle that's on your screen is that safety net. It's the safety net for your team, where they know that everything within that is behaviors that are approved, they're influencing and encouraging psychological safety, and the behaviors that sit outside of that are things that are not helpful, they're blockers, and they're things that are damaging to the team being psychologically safe. So this is an exercise you can do with your team or by yourself. But what you're doing is you're identifying behaviors, both individual and collective behaviors. So it's not just one or the other, that ones that you want to start or encourage, and ones that you want to stop doing or you want to improve or do differently. So this requires a lot of self-reflection, and we're really only as good as we can see beyond what we're doing ourselves. So obviously, leading teams at any level requires us to be reflective. And I think, Kate, that's part of what you maybe give us an insight on now in terms of the inclusion, diversity, equality piece. Managers play a key role in that.
Thanks so much, Nisha, and very happy to weigh in. And I feel like for our attendees, when you go back and have a look at these slides, really look at the two that Nisha just took you through, the ladder, and those boxes, and look at them side by side, because from an inclusion standpoint, and Nisha put it very well, we really want to start with that foundation of inclusion, but I think it's sometimes difficult for us, or at least we need to keep top of mind that can mean very different things for different people who are coming to our team in different contexts. So, for example, and I'll try to go through this quite quickly. When you're looking at that welcome box, that belonging box. We're encouraging people to share personal information, and we're encouraging people to feel okay about sharing, about burnout or mental health. Not everybody in our team necessarily comes to that from the same place. And again, these are just some headlines, but we really need to think about creating that safe space to do it. It may not be as easy as just turning up and saying, tell me, everyone, how was your weekend? One of the great examples within that is, for example, we know that there may be folks who are LGBTQ plus identified, and they may not feel like it's yet a safe place. They don't know who their colleagues are. There's also this dynamic, and I think it's important for people to know about it. And of course, we could do 8 sessions on all of these topics. But there's a dynamic that is often faced by people from racialized backgrounds, for those who aren't familiar with that word, from an ethnic minority group, perhaps, where they live and work. There's a phenomenon which has been termed the emotional tax. And this is people who may be coming to work and guarding against the possibility that they're going to face bias and discrimination, and may not be as comfortable perhaps as somebody from a majority group background to immediately share personal information. So, you really do need to be conscious of and thinking about making sure that that space is truly welcoming for everyone. And don't assume that everybody's experience is like yours. There are some people who are more ready to share, and other people who it may take a little bit of time. Again, we can get into that. You can always reach out to me, and we can talk about it in more detail. The second level around the courageous conversations, as Nisha framed them, this is where you're starting to see some of what you can really get out of a psychological safe team. This is now people are willing to disagree, challenge each other's ideas, and so on. Again, there may be things in the background that may be creating that you might not be as aware of, that may be standing in the way of some people's willingness to do that as readily. We need to be conscious of the fact that disagreeing or taking a contrary view could be viewed differently when it's coming from a person, a woman, or a person from an underrepresented group where they are. Again, there's lots of research to back up that we may judge people differently and in how they're delivering messages that are contrary perhaps to a prevailing view. So that's a second one to think about. The third on innovation, and this is what I call the inclusion sweet spot, and this is what I love to talk about as well. This is where really the magic happens, right? That's when you've got a really diverse team, lots of different perspectives, ideas, and if you can really get the juices flowing and everybody, pinging off one another and bringing those ideas to the table, that's where the best, that innovation happens. There's research to show that's where decision-making is really enhanced, and you really want to get there. However, very important to know that those really diverse and inclusive teams, the ones that you're aiming for, the innovators, they may not feel as good as being in a team where everybody's, agreeing and gets it and just connects with one another because you have the same experiences, backgrounds. And what I would say to you, particularly that 68% who's saying, yeah, I'm really in that high-performing team, just pause for a moment and say, am I thinking I'm in a high-performing team because it feels comfortable and everybody's getting on and everybody's seeing everything in the same way and we're all aiming in the same direction? I just challenge you for a moment to think about, okay, are we challenging ourselves? Are we being challenged? Are we having difficult conversations? Or does it just feel good? And part of the reason, the things that happen in really inclusive and diverse teams is that, research shows us they're processing information more carefully. They're examining and re-examining facts, and they're really trying to maintain that objectivity around their decision-making. And they're challenging each other to be at the top of their cognitive game and not taking shortcuts because we, quote, speak each other's language already. And the trick to it is the work might actually feel harder because you're being challenged, but the outcomes are better. So you really need to be comfortable with being challenged. This can be tough as a leader. I know that I have moments where somebody will come and challenge me, and I think to myself, oh, I have to manage, maybe it's my own ego, that somebody said to me, Kate, I think you're just, talking garbage over here. We really need to look, at something else. So think about those things. On the right-hand side, just some things you can think about doing. Proactively invite people into the conversation, right? Make sure that everybody in that team is being given a chance to contribute. Make sure you're doing it respectfully. Say, hey, Nisha, do you have anything to add? Nisha can then say, yeah, here's the 5 things I have to add. She's allowed to take a pass and say, you know what? I think the team covered it. We're good. Leaders, big one. Try not to speak first. There's a whole dynamic that says if the leader speaks first, then everybody in the room feels like they need to line up behind the leader's ideas. That's a hard one to manage, especially if you're trying to get a meeting running. But if you want the best ideas, you might want to think about putting that in your repertoire. Admit your own mistakes. That's a biggie. You need to be able to role model that if you want your team to be comfortable with failure, comfortable with risk, comfortable taking chances. They've got to know that mistakes are going to happen, and it's okay. And if the leader is vocal about that, I always joke that the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity department at Dentons is an absolute car crash train wreck, making mistakes all the time. And it's not because we're doing that. Of course, we make mistakes. Everybody does. But it's because we really try to role model that and talk about them a lot, because it's such an important part of inclusion. One last tip, a fun one, something we call, it's called a brainwriting exercise or simultaneous idea sharing. One of the things that we know can be really challenging is if somebody speaks, then everybody else's views are influenced by the people who went before. And so if you really want to get to those ideas, try this one. What you do is you say to the whole team, let's say you're on a virtual meeting. Okay, everybody, I want your views on X. Then you get everybody to type into the chat their views on X, but don't hit send. Wait, tell everybody type it in, and then you say go or hit send, and everybody hits send at the same time. And that way you'll really get the unfiltered, uninfluenced views of the team on a topic. It's a really great exercise, and it can really elicit some great content that you might not get any other way. So with that, Nisha, again, a real whistle stop, but back to you.
Thanks, Kate. And yeah, I think this is all about getting those key tips and takeaways. We all have different dynamics in terms of our team and where people are located. So having even those tricks it's a good one. I've never heard of that one into the chat, so I appreciate that tip. So we'll move on to dependability. And again, this might feel a little bit rushed, like we're moving very quickly. So just move along with us. And again, any of this is available to go in deeper with if you so wish. So dependability is a more commonly understood component of the high performing team. It appears and feels more straightforward because it's all about accountability. It's about people being able to rely on others in the team to be held to account for what they've agreed. And it's around setting that high standard as a collective, and then everyone pulling their weight and putting their shoulder to the wheel to achieve that high standard that's set. And it is about putting in a mechanism to deal with the accountability part when that doesn't happen, and it's not the case that people reach that same standard. So it does promote trust and accountability and that spirit of commitment. And I suppose I want to flag here a note of caution that there's a reason, as Yvonne said at the beginning, that the elements are structured in the way they are. It's because I wouldn't advise stepping into this space of trying to pull everything together accountability wise until you've addressed the idea of the psychological safety of the team. Because once the team has that level of psychological safety, then it's going to be productive when you start addressing problems fast. So we need to create that environment where feedback is encouraged, it's requested, and therefore when dependability or accountability needs to be addressed, it's done so in a constructive and really supportive manner. And we heard some of those words in the comments, supportive, like people want that. They don't want to be called out. They want to be supported in getting better at what they're doing. So the structure and clarity element here that we'll go through in relation to this model This is something that we often can feel very familiar with because in a lot of our jobs, we're quite process driven. And you might feel that you have this one mastered, or that you're very confident that the people on your team have structure and clarity. And maybe that is the case. But let's look at what this makes up, in terms of the high performing team part of it. So it is around the clear roles for the individual, in order for them to understand short-term goals and objectives. And we know it's important because it does give clarity and it helps for people to be sure of the areas they're working in, and crossover, is not an issue. But I'm wondering if you can use the comments to let us know some ways in which you ensure structure and clarity is part of your high performing team or your team. What sort of mechanisms do you have in place to create structure and clarity within the teams that you're in? So if you just want to use the chat, just throw in a word or two, anything that gives us an idea of the type of processes or systems that you have in place to ensure that okay, so communication, catch-ups, regular catch-ups, so things like that, anything that you feel you use, in a way that creates that structure, that clarity. Objectives, KPIs, right? Responsibilities, checking in on a weekly basis, team meetings, a lightning round, I like that, and weekly check-ins, okay. Regular chats. Great, so seeing a lot of meetings, check-ins, all that sort of stuff, which is great. And if we move on, flick on there, Natalie, to what we have, we're hearing you and we're hearing what you're saying. So some of the ways we've outlined it here today is talking about that expectations, and I see that common goals, expectations being clear. So we use the term scorecard. Again, language is not important, but what this is something beyond the job description. It's beyond the list of tasks or responsibilities. It's really looking at what people's role, what the purpose of that role is in a business, in this business, in your team. And what we really want to know here is what are the things that person is functionally accountable for, the metrics associated with that role, and the impact that the role has on the business. And that's really important when we talk about impact, is connecting what I'm doing every day to the impact of this business and the team has on this business commercially, as well as other factors. And here we want to also understand the key competencies of the role. So it's not about just a list of tasks or responsibilities, but what are you supposed to be getting better at? What are you supposed to be working on? Could it be around developing client relationships? Could it be a piece of technical expertise or competency? Or could it be around coaching more junior people in the team, building up their competency as well, developing others within the team? So it's into the detail of what does this mean for the individual. And the big part around this, around the structure and clarity for us, is around expectation change. So what happens when times of stress, pressure, deadlines, unexpected workflows come in? What happens to the expectations in the team? How do we communicate when expectations change, when there's a different drive in the team, when there's a different intensity to the work that's happening? And this is the part a lot of teams struggle with, is from the day to day, we can work very well and we're all very comfortable. And when the pressure comes in, we start to work differently because we start to maybe go into different ways of being, depending on our own strengths. So, often the most productive approach to dealing with this is to plan ahead. If you know you have quarterly deadlines, or you have particular times of the year that there's a high intensity of workflows, then talk about that in advance. Bring the team together and say, how are we going to communicate? How are we going to work well together? And we've lots of tools about how to get the best out of the team in terms of how they like to convene, how they like to work together. So it is something that you can explore, and it helps the team to work more collaboratively, and it builds that communication, which so many people have mentioned. So I have to talk about meetings. Let's talk about meetings. Death by meetings, as we like to call it a lot of the time. And in this post-pandemic world, especially for ourselves, our diaries are filled from dawn to dusk with blocks of meetings. So what we ask every client we work with is, tell us about your meetings. Tell us about the cadence of your meetings, how frequently, who's at them, what's the purpose of the meeting, and do you have a structured agenda? And what we often ask them, and I think a couple of people mentioned in the comments, maybe like this lightning round or some sort of a quick daily connect or something. And this is something we recommend to all of our clients, is to have that daily check-in, cut through the noise, set a very structured, very targeted agenda that looks at good news, which is a great way to build that psychological safety. The number one thing you have to do today, maybe a topic you need for discussion, you need for approval or decision making, and somewhere that you're stuck or have been blocked by others. And this tactic is something super simple. And embedding that, we've gotten feedback from teams that it's sometimes bringing that one thing into their business has been the most impactful thing. So sometimes we're a bit disappointed that it isn't a few other things, but often, that's just how simple it can be. So diving deeper and asking what's the role of the team is also important. And that may be more relevant for some teams more than others. So the last piece on this, the structure and clarity, which is such as the inclusion is to Kate, the strengths is to Nisha. This is my absolute dreamboat topic, which is all around understanding your people as individuals, understanding their natural talents, natural strengths. And when you get to understand that, leveraging that to get the best out of your people, setting those goals, they're really meaningful, supporting people to lean into their talents and strengths when they're setting those goals and when they're achieving those goals. And that's the part of, I think people mentioned KPIs and metrics. And that's great for the team to have that collective objective of achieving those targets, and especially commercially for the in-house legal team. But in terms of me as an individual, me as the team member, what's driving me? And that's really important that we think about that when we're setting meaningful goals for people.
Can I just jump in,
yeah,
Nisha,
Kate,
just briefly
just
here, because I
it.
just want to, just the two bubbles on the right-hand side of the slide, and just quickly to add in, everything that Nisha has said, hopefully you're doing in your teams. It's great for me to listen. It's a reminder of really good habits. But again, just from an inclusion standpoint, a diversity and equity standpoint, structure and clarity are hyper important, because in a lot of cases, we can get to a place where we rely on shorthands. We think that people really understand how things work, and that can be a bit of a trap, because whatever those unwritten rules are, and maybe we should have a big X through it, but you got to be really careful with unwritten rules of doing things, because those unwritten rules aren't always communicated across groups in the same way, between people in the same way. And actually, as a team leader, you could really be losing out if you're relying on unwritten rules and you don't have that structure and clarity, because there could be what we call those, hidden gems of people in your team who are spending way too much trying to figure out what the rules are and how to do things, or just don't know what the unwritten rules are, and you're not getting them performing and really uncovering what they can contribute. So from an inclusion standpoint, I just wanted to highlight those two bubbles, and I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, no, that's great, Kate. And we actually have this amazing tool called Culture Canvas, and it looks specifically at rules, norms, rituals that are all embedded in our culture. We might know it, and we work to unpick what they are. And some things within them are acceptable, and some things aren't. So it is it's such a deep subject, and we are definitely racing through it. So with that in mind, we'll tip on to the next piece, Natalie, thank you, which is all around meaning. So this really is deeply personal to people. It's around what personal fulfillment people get out of their work as a team overall and individually. And we know why this is obviously super important to people, that they have a sense of purpose about their work and they're motivated. And we just know from all the research, endless research on engagement, that people need to feel passionate, they need to feel engaged, to be loyal, to go the extra mile, and we just know that it's really clear, and you can probably really relate to that, to those people who are really engaged. So this really is a push back on us as leaders, is to understand people that you work with, that you lead, and that understand that they really want to be seen and heard. And we'll see here on the other slide, Natalie, that this is really all about understanding, helping people to understand how to see things in their job differently, how help them see their purpose, help them to, be heard, feel proud. And it is about building that meaning, connecting them to what they're doing every day, getting up, getting into work, being part of this team, contributing to the overall goals. But why? Like, we do need to ask, there's a person behind every role that we have. So it is really a transformative shift from being managers and leaders to being more like coaches and mentors. Because you can see here, for example, it says, you know, it doesn't say, give me a purpose. It says, help me to see my purpose. So it is about trying to unpick and unravel what's deep within the person. And as you know, we know that we need to do that through the inclusion lens, which Kate has really well articulated for us as well throughout the afternoon. So I suppose the last one I might just skip on to, Niamh, conscious of time, is around impact. So this is really crucially important as well, because similar to meaning, you know, it is around trying to help that person see their role. It ties into this meaning piece very, very well. And it is about, you know, people seeing their own unique contribution and how it has value within the team, within the business, commercially, and indeed with external stakeholders, depending on your business, what business you're in, what industry you're in. It could be, you know, the climate impact. It could be beyond that. So this is again personal to people, but it's about them understanding that what they're doing every day has an impact. And this is again back to the manager, the leader, to really push that crucial role in helping people see that. And what we find is some people are naturally wired to be able to connect what they're doing in the now, today, with a future goal, a future aspiration, with the bigger picture. They're just futuristic. They're able to visualize these things. But a lot of people are very present-minded, and they're more tactical and focused on the task in hand. So they may not be able to see what their one thread of work, where that sits in the big tapestry of this masterpiece of the team or the business. So the leader's role is to take the values of the business seriously, to take the business impact seriously themselves. Like, we have to, as leaders, believe the business impact and be able to articulate it ourselves in order for our team to buy into that and understand that for what they're doing. We lead by example in this way. We reflect back to the team how their work has a measurable impact. So it's back to us to keep giving that affirmation and that recognition that, you know, I got this feedback. I heard this recently from a senior member. This is what a partner said. This is what I heard. That's back on the manager to give that information back to the team members. And I suppose if we flick on here, Natalie, we'll see ways of doing that, how you might go about figuring that out. Because again, it's kind of like opening Pandora's box. How do you figure all these things out? Sometimes it's just as simple as changing your dialogue, sharpening your dialogue. And I think a few people said here around having these one-to-ones with people. So in your next one-to-one, pick 2 or 3 things from this list and ask a person these questions about their role. Ask them about the last time they felt proud or they got good feedback, or how they feel they're impacting. So arm them with the ability to reflect on what they're doing, because they're probably not doing it for themselves naturally. And I suppose it is about trying to help them understand that, you know, it's not just mechanical, the work we're doing. You know, if your function didn't exist in the business, what could that impact be? It could be quite serious. So it is back to us to try and reflect that, articulate that in a really meaningful way to the individual. And you will know your people best. And this really is all about getting to know them even more than you do right now. So wrapping up, I think we're doing okay, but wrapping up, I'm seeing the clock ticking by here. Just the last slide there, Natalie, is really just about what we've talked about so far. And I really appreciate Kate's lens on it too, which is so relevant for everything we're doing. But really what we have been talking is all about behavior. It's around how we treat people, how we talk to them, how we encourage them, and how we listen when we ask these questions. And I suppose some of the next steps and some of the ways to look at what we've all wrapped up this Google model is around how to take the next steps in changing your approach or your mindset from a more hurried way of tactical, kind of purpose, calendar-driven, looking back ideas to that more future-focused, strengths-based, you know, bringing it in to be in a multidimensional conversation. And, you know, maybe you are, and I know we got a very high score at the beginning, maybe you are really in tune as leaders. And if that's the case, brilliant. Our work here is done. Delighted. But maybe you're hearing things today and you're thinking, need to reflect more about what do my team think about me? Like, I might think this about myself, but what do the people who are around me think about me? Am I coming across the way I intend? And maybe that's the case, but maybe not. And if it's not, or if you're looking to make some changes, focus on where you can get the quick fixes. The Gallup research tells us that people who will get praise or recognition within 7 days for good work done, they're more likely to be part of high-performing teams. So we know that feedback, praise, recognition, acknowledgement, they're all levers that we can pull as managers to affect some small changes. So I'd encourage you guys to all take the first steps. That's me, Yvonne.
Thanks, Nisha. Thanks, Kate, for that. Wow, there's a lot of information in a very short space of time. We could easily spend an hour probably on each of those elements. So we recognize that there's a lot of information there that we've shared with you. In terms of next steps, just to try and summarize a little bit what we can do with all of this information. If you would like the slides, yes, we were just about to say, yes, we will definitely make the slides available. Nisha, would you like, Niamh, would you like individuals to contact you to request the slides?
Yes, so I will pop an email address and just pop us a note and we're happy to share a copy of the slides. That's no problem. So I'll pop the address in the chat now.
Great. Thanks, Niamh. So what can we do as a result of this session? Definitely we need time to reflect and think about some of these key points that we've talked about, some great practical tips, and really apply them to your teams. I'm sure you're thinking, actually, as a team, yeah, we do that already, which is great, you know, tick the box. But maybe think about, okay, there's a few things that we're not doing or we don't talk about. So maybe that's something you can focus on. In order to help you with that, we have put together a questionnaire that, again, if you ask for the slides, you will also get the questionnaire. I'll show you the questionnaire in a second, but just to explain, the questionnaire is, or checklist, however we want to call it, is a way of identifying which of these key areas, these 5 elements, are strong or less strong within your team. So that's something that you could do immediately. What we would also suggest is that you share that with your team and maybe ask them to complete this questionnaire. So you're getting everybody's view. We have to assume that there's psychological safety there for people to be open. But that's something that you can talk about, that you encourage people to be very open about their answers to the questionnaire. What can you do then? Well, look at the areas. Sorry, just go back one slide. Thank you, Natalie. What can you do? What can you do then? Is we'll look at the areas where you're strong, where you're less strong. Can you put this on your agenda item? Can you put this on your team meetings? Can you start having more dedicated conversations about what is our team culture? Where are we in terms of high performing? You know, what improvements can we make? And you know, not take certain things for granted. And then what can you do in the future? Well, if this goes well and people are engaged, is this something you could do on a quarterly basis? We can't be complacent that just because we're a high performing team now, that we will always be a high performing team. You may have new team members coming in, or things may change, projects change, pressures change. It's good to just have this conversation over and over again. And then finally, you know, if there are areas that you want to focus on, you know, obviously to delve deeper, maybe get some external support with that. So in terms of the questionnaire, just very quickly, I'll give you a highlight of what it looks like. It's a very straightforward questionnaire, just a tick box. Natalie, if we could just move on to the next one. Yes, so here we go. So this is basically the questionnaire. 13 questions that cover the 5 key areas, and then also 3 points around inclusion and diversity on a scale of strongly agree to disagree. If we just move on to the next slide, we can see how you could complete it. So here's one that we completed earlier, and how to score it. And then look at your percent, or work out the percentage to see overall, how am I performing as a team? And then you can use that score to pat yourself on the back, you know, well done, we're scoring high, or are there some areas in which to focus? That's a great takeaway, we think, for you to move on with this topic and involve your teams, which I think is really important. So Niamh, would you like?
Thanks, Yvonne. How to sum that up is the question. So we do have, I think Tom mentioned in the chat just there, this is a very different session for us to run. So as I said in the chat, we'd love your feedback on that. We also have one final question for everyone. So you'll see the poll appearing now. I guess in thinking about today's session and your in-house legal role, which of the following related areas would you value a deep dive session? We're very conscious, as Yvonne said, we give you loads of information in a very short period of time. So are there other areas that you would like support, related areas here? So loads of views coming in on this one. So it's lovely to see people getting involved straight away on this question. I'm going to give it conscious of time. We're going to do a quick one on this. So let's go 3, 2, 1. We'll close the poll and share the results with you all, which will also be interesting to see what your peers on the call think about this particular area. So let's end the poll and share the results. So I'm afraid no rest for the wicked in terms of our panel today. So yes, we'd like some more on the 5 steps on deep dives across the Google framework, and also on managing performance, so objective setting, appraisals. So those 2 appearing top of the charts for today. I want to say a huge thanks to everyone who joined us today. We had some super engagement all along the way. So we want to say a very candid and heartfelt thanks for jumping into today's topic with us. I'd also like to say a thank you to Yvonne, Nisha and Kate for really such a considered session today. A huge amount of planning goes in the background to this, so I want to say thank you for packing in the content and doing it in such a considered and thoughtful way. So thank you for that. We have lots of great sessions coming up, as you'll see on the screen, not before the end of the calendar year. So we'll be back with you all in early 2025, and we're very much looking forward to seeing you on those sessions with us. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining and wishing you all a great rest of day.